Welcome to my World History Notes, where I read from the book I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible Believer Looks at World History, which you can find on Lulu.com, Amazon.com, and at the Bible Baptist Bookstore. I'd use it as a guide. It's a survey. It's not deep. You can add to it. You can change it. Um, you can create your own lesson plan at the end of each chapter. There's questions about major topics, just so you know that they exist. I'm not trying to say you have to agree with my conclusions. Um, and because I, self-published it, I did have a little bit of help. There may be a couple of errors in it, grammatical errors, things like that. Tried to clear those, but you can just follow me here as well. So today we're going to talk about the corruption in early Christianity, some of the reasons for it, some of the events and people before we move on. So let's begin today. To sum up the disdain the Christian who loved the Bible had for the Alexandrian brand of mixing pagan philosophy with Christianity, which I talked about before, Tertullian said, quote, "What has Athens to do with Jerusalem?" That was cited by Bruce in his Canon of Scripture. Origen became the headmaster of the school as a teenager, which I talked about yesterday, apparently 18 years old, and immediately threw himself into Greek philosophy. He also was very eccentric and even castrated himself in a perverted interpretation of Matthew 19:12, hoping to avoid future temptation. He died resulting from injuries received in the Decian persecution after being tortured in 249 AD. He wrote so copiously that he left 6,000 volumes of work, quoting the scriptures numerous times, and even quoting the same verse differently several times. Among his odd beliefs were that all would eventually be saved after a time in hell, even Satan himself. As strange as this may seem, Origen was one of a handful of teachers who had the most influence on Christian thinkers throughout the ages. Even today, his method of allegorical interpretation and his admixture of the scripture and philosophy is preferred and praised by many Christian scholars. Origen influenced Bible translations by taking several post resurrection copies of the Hebrew scriptures, including the non canonical Old Testament Apocrypha, which had been rejected by the Jews themselves as being inspired, that had been translated to Greek, and laying them out side by side and composing his own. This version of the Hebrew manuscripts translated into Greek became known as the Septuagint after a legend that an Egyptian king had brought Hebrew elders to Egypt to translate the sacred works into Greek for his own Jewish population, which, as at Alexandria, had become Hellenized. Many Bibles today use Origen's Septuagint through such manuscripts as the Codex Vaticanus, Codex Sinaiticus, and Alexandrinus to translate the Old Testament rather than the Hebrew manuscripts that Jesus and the apostles quoted. For instance, Jesus refers to such Hebrew grammatical terms as jot and tittle, which would not be found in the Greek language in Matthew 5:18, and brackets the Jewish scriptures between Genesis and Second Chronicles in Matthew 23:35, which is the order the Hebrew Bible was written, with Second Chronicles as the last book having no apocrypha. The Apocrypha was rejected for many reasons by the Jews. None were written in Hebrew. They proposed statements in contradiction to the rest of the scripture and contradict themselves, as in the three separate deaths of Antiochus Epiphanes, among other inconsistencies. Even though these books are in the manuscripts that many Bibles are translated from, the Apocrypha is usually excluded today. Even the King James translators put that in between the Testaments, and then eventually it was just removed. The main evidence for the existence of a BC Septuagint is a document called the Letter of Aristeas. This letter can be read online and can be examined closely. It is supposed to detail the way that the Egyptian king went about having the Old Testament translated into Greek. However, many consider this to be a fraud, possibly perpetrated by Philo himself, as it contains many factual errors and could not have been written by the person who's given credit for it. To not belabor this point for the what I'm trying to say, the head librarian of the Great Library, who supposedly oversaw the project, did not serve under the king in question. There are many other issues that make many scholars consider this letter a fraud, although you will find just as many who consider it perfectly legitimate. Go and make your own decision. With regard to the Septuagint itself, it is believed by some to be the efforts of several Christian era church leaders to rewrite the citations of the New Testament of the Old Testament back into the Old Testament itself to attain some type of uniformity that suited them. So I'm going to reread that. With regard to the Septuagint itself, it is believed by some to be the efforts of several Christian era church leaders to rewrite the citations in the New Testament of the Old Testament back into the Old Testament itself to attain some type of uniformity that suited them. Many times in the New Testament, the writers simply paraphrase Old Testament verses. Remember, to the Roman mind, this is unacceptable. Unity and uniformity are the hallmarks of Roman thinking. However, this too is a contentious idea, but that is a part of the fun of studying history. It is a great experience in detective work, and often investigators studying the same material come to totally different conclusions. So, we're going to begin talking next time about Marcus Aurelius, move on to some other emperors and some things in Rome as we progress before we go on to other parts of the world. Thank you very much for listening.